The ex was living off me and then he called me to his wedding. Big mistake. I was a sophomore in college at the time. Everything seemed simple, almost fairy tale-like. Books, classes, coffee from the machine, and dreams of a future that was sure to be better. I wasn't looking for love. I thought I had my whole life ahead of me. But one chance encounter changed everything. Max. He wasn't in our group. He was a little older, came to our faculty to see a friend of his. Tall, with slightly disheveled hair and that easy, dangerous smile that he seemed to be able to get anything he wanted. He wasn't classically handsome, more like attractive, like he was surrounded by a special energy, calm, and a little anxious at the same time. He noticed me right away. He came over, made a joke. Not intrusively, he just let me know that he was interested in me. We got to talking. Max knew how to listen. It's a rare gift, when a person doesn't just wait for his turn to speak, but really hears you. We talked about everything, what we wanted, what we were afraid of. He dreamed of starting his own business, talked about traveling, his dream of moving to Texas. It seemed like he wasn't afraid to be vulnerable, and that was the payoff. Then he talked about the challenges. No pity, no complaints, just the fact. That he was in debt, that his parents weren't helping, that he was working as hard as he could to close the loans and live. It didn't sound like an excuse. It sounded more like a confession, and for some reason, it was at that moment that I felt for him. Warmth. I wanted to be there for him, to hold him. He seemed strong, but inside he was wounded, and I wanted to be the person who would be there for him, who would help him get out, who would believe in him when others did not. That feeling is hard to describe. It wasn't instantaneous, it was more like a warm wave that came over you slowly but surely. Every new conversation, every casual glance in the hallway, every evening spent talking in the coffee shop across the street from the college, all of it wove an invisible thread between us. I noticed him writing more and more often, the way he showed up at recess, as if by chance. His eyes searching for me in the crowd. He told me that he was afraid of getting burned again, saying that past relationships had left scars. I understood him, and I didn't rush him. The first time he took my hand, it wasn't like a movie, no music, no fireworks. It was just his hand on mine, and everything inside of me clenched with tenderness. It wasn't just an affair, it was the feeling that someone really needed you. Not as just another crush, but as a support, as a home, as a calm after the storm. We were starting to build our dreams. We dreamed of renting an apartment, going on a trip, building a career. Max said I was the only person he could be himself with, and I believed. Because love at 20 isn't about calculations. It's about faith. It's about believing that you can be everything to someone, that together you can get through anything. I didn't know then that that's what would be the beginning of the end. My desire to save, to be there for you at all costs, to believe when maybe I should have stopped. But at that moment I was happy. Really happy, sincerely. And perhaps that's what makes the first feelings so bright. They are pure, naive, and therefore priceless. After graduating from college, everything began to change. Life no longer consisted of lectures, cafes, and dreams. Adult reality came crashing into our lives without a knock, with schedules, bills, fatigue, and the need to make decisions. I quickly found a job, not perfect, but stable. It was harder for Max. He had temporary part-time jobs. Salesman, construction worker, courier. He said that everything will get better, you just need time. And I believed him. When I asked him to move in with me, it was from the heart. I thought it was a logical step. It's easier together. We'd split the rent, take turns cooking, support each other. But it didn't work out that way. Max moved in with me. And it was only cute at first glance. He brought coffee in the morning, hugged me when I came home from work, and laughed at my jokes even when they weren't funny. Except the coffee ran out fast, along with the illusions. He promised to pay half the rent, but from the first month there were delays. Once because they cheated him out of a paycheck. The second time because everything to pay off the interest on the loans. The third guy just didn't say a word. I paid my own way. It's okay. I thought things will work out. He's going through a rough patch. I'm strong, I can handle it. But the rough patch didn't end. Day by day, I noticed how the atmosphere in the apartment was changing. I woke up, got ready, hurried to the office. He was still asleep. When I came back, he was home, but the same dirty dishes were lying around as in the morning. Dust on the shelves, an unwashed sink, empty pizza boxes. I silently washed, wiped, cleaned. At first with the hope that he just didn't notice, then with anger that he pretended not to see, and then with bitter fatigue because I realized that he just didn't care. It was especially painful when I asked him to at least take out the trash. A small request, nothing special, but even that turned out to be an impossible mission. Bags of garbage stood at the door for 2 days at a time. I'd stumble over them, coming in after a 10-hour shift while he lay on the couch with his phone. When I started talking about it, he would either shut up or turn it into a joke. "Come on, I'm tired, I've been working today, I've been carrying bags for 12 hours. And me? My work? It is not physically but mentally exhausts, so that by the evening it seemed even breathing is hard. Over time there was an invisible wall between us. I felt myself not as a beloved woman but as a mother, who cares, cooks, pays, endures, and should also radiate support. And he's like a teenager who doesn't want to grow up and is constantly passing the buck. I started to shut down. I didn't want to talk anymore. I didn't share my dreams anymore because they sounded silly in a room with a man who couldn't maintain a normal standard of living, let alone any ambition. He'd notice this and he'd ask, "What are you doing?" And I'd smile and say, "It's okay," because I was afraid of conflict, because I still believed he'd change. But love is a two-person story. And at some point, you realize you're saving someone who didn't even ask for help, who's just used to you always being there for him, always helping him out, always holding him up. And I was tired. I was tired, deep, not from being tired. It was the indifference and lack of respect from the person who supposedly loves you. And then one day, I just woke up, and I just felt empty. Not anger, not resentment, just emptiness. It was like someone had drained me of all my energy, no desire to speak, no desire to forgive, only fatigue, so deep that I couldn't even cry. It was an ordinary weekday. I got home from work later than usual. I was stuck in a meeting. It was raining outside, my socks were soaked, and the bus was delayed. I held on all day as best I could, and when I opened the apartment door, I was greeted by the familiar musty smell of last night's dinner, a pile of dirty dishes and a full trash bag still on the doorstep. He hadn't taken it out again. He hadn't even noticed I'd been gone all day. He was lying there with his headphones on, staring at his phone, laughing at something on the screen. I walked silently into the kitchen. I took out a rag, started cleaning like I always do, on automatic, and then I just stopped, sat down on the stool. I looked at the scattered things, at the dust in the corner, at the stack of unpaid receipts, and suddenly I realized I couldn't do it anymore. I went out into the room. There was no cry in my voice, just a tiredness behind all my accumulated pain. I said I didn't want to do this anymore, that I was tired, that I wasn't his mum. I don't have to support him and clean up after him and talk him into growing up. We're not a couple, we're just roommates. He didn't say anything, he just stared. I went on to say that what I was asking from him was just respect, help, responsibility, and finally I gave him an ultimatum. Either you pay half the rent, share household chores with me, or you leave. The silence lasted forever, and then he laughed. He laughed. "God, you're so dramatic. Everything's wrong with you. You know, my mum always did everything. I'm not used to the whole woman thing." I froze. This is the moment of truth, the words that open your eyes. It was clear. He was comfortable. He wasn't going to change. He'd just found a new mom with unconditional support, dinner on the stove, and a purse girlfriends. He was not at all what I expected to see. Intelligent, calm, with irony in his voice and warmth in his eyes. We told each other the story of our past relationship, and when I jokingly told him that I'd been invited to his ex-girlfriend's wedding, he grinned. "You know, I'd love to go, just to see the circus." I looked at him, and then I nodded. "Let's do it. Together. Why not? This circus needs a big show." It wasn't a decision out of revenge, it was out of dignity. I wasn't looking for revenge, I just wanted to even the score, not to be the victim, not to be the loser, not to be the ex who's alone. Max wanted a razzle-dazzle, and he got it. Just not in the form he expected, and inside me I already felt something very interesting was coming. The day before the wedding I was a little hesitant, not because I wanted him back. That hadn't happened for a long time, but because I was afraid that I would be pulled back into that shadow where I once lived, where I made excuses, tolerated, and kept silent. I was afraid that seeing him again would stir up everything that I had so diligently sewed up with the threads of silence and self-development. But in the morning, when I looked at myself in the mirror, I realized, this girl he will not break again. The dress is elegant but not flashy, no drama, just a beautiful woman who knows what she's worth. Steve met me with a slight smile, but I could see in his eyes he was feeling that strange excitement too. We were both going there to set the record straight on this shared history. The wedding took place in a country restaurant, just as I had imagined. Stucco, white tablecloths, waiters with strange smiles, a photo zone with the initials of the bride and groom. At the entrance is Max, in a suit, with that very ostentatious confidence which he always tried to wear as armor. When he saw us, he froze. On his face flashed emotions that I'll remember for a long time, first confusion, then anger, then a strained smile. "Oh, you came," he muttered, and then his gaze fell on Steve. Not alone." Steve shook his hand, coldly, politely. "Hey, long time no see." I watched it silently, with a slight smile. There was no more fear, not of him, not of how I would look, because I knew I was out of his power. The ceremony began, Chloe, beautiful as a picture, but there was anxiety in her eyes. She kept looking around, like she was waiting for a catch. When she spotted Steve, she went blank. It was like her whole day was coming apart, but she tried her best to hide it behind her smile. Steve just nodded at her, silently, but with a message. "I can see how you're feeling." During the banquet, something happened that I was expecting but hadn't planned for. Chloe went outside, and after a while Steve followed her, and they started talking, and I immediately realized what their conversation was about. Quietly at first, then louder. Somebody started to turn around. Max was making a toast at this point, but stopped talking when the guests started to get distracted. He walked over. And then, as if by a click, everything exploded. Chloe began to shout, "I'm just another sheep who almost tied her life to him. And you what? You came with his ex-girlfriend to get back at me? Did you want me to feel guilty all this time?" Max tried to pull her back inside. "Come on, there's people here. A wedding. What do you think you're doing?" But Chloe was undeterred. I saw myself in her at that crucial moment. A minute ago, she found out the truth. Just like with me, he lied to her about his past relationships, which allegedly hurt him. How he was abused, manipulated. Of course, he is always the victim in relationships. Steve was standing there, not interfering. He just looked at Chloe calmly, understandingly, and she suddenly started crying. But it wasn't hysteria, it was a release. She said, "I'm not going to save you anymore," and she walked away. She just walked away. Right in her dress, barefoot on the grass, and a couple minutes later she got in the car with Steve. He didn't even turn around. Max was alone, among the confused guests, with a glass in his hand, wearing a jacket that suddenly seemed too big for him. He tried to pretend that everything was under control. The mask cracked. I stood at a distance, and inside silence, not triumph, not gloating, just clarity. He didn't lose because he was alone. It's because he played life all this time without knowing how to love. Not her, not me, not himself. I turned around and walked away. There was nothing more for me to do here. That night I was riding in a cab with the windows down, the wind ruffling my hair, and I suddenly realized that I was finally free, not only from him, but also from my old role. No more proving anything, not to myself, not to him. I don't have to justify myself to anyone. And that is the purest, truest feeling of victory. It was a few days after the wedding that never became a wedding. My mood was strange, a mixture of lightness, desolation, and deep silence inside. That same week, Chloe texted me, "Thanks for coming," And if you don't mind, I'd like to talk. Alone. We met at a quiet cafe on the edge of town. She came in without makeup, with her hair bunched up, wearing a simple t-shirt and eyes that finally had life in them. Real life, no filter. I didn't know, she began at once. About everything. About you. About how he used you. He told me you were psycho, that you humiliated him, that he suffered. I believed it. I believed it then. I listened in silence, no anger, no desire to say, I told you so. Just calm acceptance. I knew he was telling her the same thing he'd told me about his previous relationships. Always the victim, always white and fluffy, and the he-women around him are bitches, manipulators, aggressors. He was different, Chloe continued. He seemed caring at first, so tender, interesting. He looked at me as if I was special, like I was the only one who could save him from his complicated life. And then it started. First, the innocent requests. Then, just a little loan, just for a couple days. Then, I'm having a hard time, you don't understand, I'm different. And you start to think that maybe you really are cold, not kind enough, too demanding. I nodded, painfully familiar. Max was a master at flipping reality. He didn't lie outright. He looked for the cracks in you and drove nails into them. I wanted to say something reassuring, but she smiled first, and she said, "Thank you for coming. The way you held on, it changed a lot of things for me. You showed me that it's possible to walk away and only get stronger." It wasn't Max that I finally let go. He'd been out of my life for a long time. I let go of the guilt he'd been placing on me for years, the one I'd tied to myself. I no longer felt abandoned, deceived, naive. I was alive, and no longer in the past. I was in the present. My story with Max was over. I was no longer someone who was willing to endure pain just to have someone around. Now I choose to be someone who doesn't demand sacrifice, but values the person next to me. And that's my victory.